Hi there. This tutorial is about the user interface controls you have for tuning your recipes. We have this tile mosaic photo which we like to blend with some peeled paint. So we click on the left bottom button to enter the editor, and what you see on the right side, you see these little blue borders around the thumbnails, which means if you're on top, you target with your controls the texture. If you click on the next one, you target the base image, and then you have some possibility for final tuning for the combined blended image. So you normally always start with the texture, and the first thing you do, you look at the different blending modes, and they have all their different characteristics. It's hard to say which is best. There's no generally best. There's just what you like or what you don't like. In this case, we are kind of stuck between the overlay and the soft light. I think the soft light gives a little bit smoother rendering of the image, which we prefer in this case. But just to go back to show difference, you can come up with very funky, very different results, which can be very exciting. So don't put it away, but this is not what we want to deal today with. We stay with soft light. So the next ones are controlling the highlights and the shadows in the texture. If you see, we can mute the highlights. In this case, we can be quite bright with the highlights because we want the sparkle of this mosaic. The shadows is the same thing. You can darken it or a little bit more open shadows here. The next thing is the saturation. You see, we have already toned down a little bit the saturation of the texture. That's the texture. The texture has a slightly bluish cast, which we may not like that much. We want this kind of breaking up the image. That's what we like about this texture. The texture is blurred, so I give you an example. When it's full there, it gets too harsh. If it's very blurred, it's just nearly not there. So in this case, we stay somewhere in between. Now we go to the adjustments of the base layer. Again, here we also like to have some sort of blur to give the image a certain softness, which gives it a more smooth rendering. This is not true for all images, but in this image it is the case. But while we're there, we always like to play with the invert and see, what would we get? Funky, interesting, not for today. Again, the shadows and highlights of the base, so you see, if you are in the middle, you have too harsh highlights. We want them to be smooth, but get there. And the shadows also, we don't want to block the shadows. We want it quite open. So finally, we target the blended image. That's kind of the last control we do. We keep the shadows and highlights as is, as a default, because I think we've done quite well with controlling them via the texture and the base image. Saturation, that's also not much to do. This is quite important now, that we can now add a little bit contrast. We don't want it too soft, we don't want it too harsh. So it kind of in between. And then you can say what kind of brightness. They act iteratively. You have to, if you go up with the contrast, you may change the brightness a little bit. In this image, we really like also to tone down a little bit the opacity to give it a more natural rendering. So if you look at that image now, you don't really know where it comes from. You wouldn't know whether this was an architecture with these kind of warps or where it came from. But that's exactly the point. Once we have done that, we would just say save the image, and we may even, in this case, because we like the rendering, we may even save the recipe. And here we have two possibilities. We overwrite the existing recipe, or what we prefer here, we would make it a new copy of it, peeled paint, mosaic. Okay. So we have now two recipes with the same texture. We could switch between them, you see, and the smoother one which we finally got. That's for now. Bye bye.